On today's episode of the franchise, July 20th, MLB trade deadline is a few weeks away, less than 2 weeks away. Going to talk about some of the big players that could be moved, as well as what teams could be buying and selling at this year's MLB trade deadline. And yes, that does include Shohei Ohtani, potential Shohei Ohtani trade. We will talk about Shohei, as well as DeAndre Hopkins joining the Tennessee Titans, what that could look like next season for Tennessee, and then the NFL running back market with Saquon, Josh Jacobs not reaching long-term deals and not signing their franchise tags, and then just the plethora of free agent running backs that are still seem to be pristine top 15, top 10 running backs right now in the NFL. Before we get into it, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads. In the description, go follow all of those platforms. Going to be a lot more active on those. And I know it's been a while since the last episode of the pod. Took a little break. We're back. We're 49 days away from the start of the NFL season, and we're about 37-ish days from the start of college football. A lot of football talk coming soon. But let's start here with the MLB trade deadline. About 2 weeks away. It's on August 1st. And we seem to have a pretty good idea as of now of what teams are guaranteed sellers and what teams will be buyers. Obviously, there's still a pretty good mix of teams in the middle that we're unsure about. But going through here first, the sellers, what teams, what players could potentially be available on the market this season. And let's start here with the St. Louis Cardinals. The Cardinals, very disappointing season for them. 43-53, 10 games under 500. They're 10 games out of the National League Central, and they're done. 10 games out. They have no they are done. Even in a National League Central that is a very mid-division, very lackluster division, they do not have a chance to make the postseason. I mean, not even in the wild card with all the teams above them. They're right now 9.5 games out of a wild card spot. I don't see them going on a run, and there's no point in them buying, especially when the general manager and the front office says, look, we're going to sell. We're going to trade some people at the trade deadline. Whether or not that is MVP Paul Goldschmidt and top 3 MVP finisher, arguably the best defensive third baseman, Nolan Arenado, is yet to be seen. I don't think those two get moved. Goldschmidt, I know he has another year left on his deal after this, and Arenado has about 4 or 5 years left. But those guys, the leaders of this team, the best players on the St. Louis Cardinals roster, those guys aren't getting moved. But some guys that could get moved. How about Tyler O'Neill, Dylan Carlson, Paul DeJong, Tommy Edman, even potentially Lars Nootbaar. I know he's a fan favorite. He's only 25. Jordan Montgomery, Jack Flaherty, Giovanni Gallegos, Jordan Hicks. And they would potentially love to move on from Wilson Contreras. That's probably not going to be a realistic thing to happen with the amount of money and years he has left on his deal with the production he's put up this season. But look, with the disappointing season that St. Louis has been having, the lack of pitching, their offense, they have a lot of talent, right? Nolan, Arenado, Goldschmidt, Nolan Gorman has been amazing this season. Jordan Walker. They have nice pieces on the offensive end to be a good team. And it's a matter of they just don't have pitching. They don't have starting pitching, and they don't have relievers. And with guys like Flaherty and Jordan Montgomery being free agents at the end of the season, it makes sense for them to move off of those guys, get younger, get prospects, and then build for 2024. I don't think they're going to go full. I don't think they're going to tear it down and be bad for the next 3 to 5 seasons. But I do think they're going to give up on this season, look to 2024, and see how they can win the National League Central going forward. But Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt, those guys, in my opinion, seem very, very unlikely to be moved, although they would bring back some huge hauls. But that would mean you're going full rebuild. I don't necessarily see that happening for the Cardinals. The White Sox, I think this is the team that you're going to get a lot of move from at this deadline. Lance Lynn, Tim Anderson, Eloy Jimenez, Yasmani Grandal, Mike Clevenger, potentially even Dylan Cease. And they have tons of relievers in that bullpen that could be on the move as well. Look, this is the second year in the row for the White Sox of a disappointing season. You look at last season. I think I picked them to win the American League Central. This season, I thought they would be a lot better than they are because the talent they have on this roster should be performing way better. I also forgot to mention Lucas Giolito is definitely going to be moved at this deadline. But look, the White Sox, with a disappointing season for the second year in a row, they're not going anywhere. The way they've been playing, I mean, Tim Anderson, we'll start with him. He has been horrible this season on the offensive end. Previously in his career, he's one of the best offensive shortstops in the game, hitting near 300 every single year of his career. And then now I think he only has one home run on the entire season, and we're over halfway through the month of July. They're 40-57, 10 games in the division. They are not competing for anything this season. Now, I don't see them moving Dylan Cease. Tons of control left. He's only 20. I think he's 28, 29 years old. He has tons of control left. Yeah, they could get a huge haul for him. And maybe he gets moved. I just don't see that happening. And I definitely do not see Luis Robert getting traded as well. He's second in the American League in home runs this season behind Ohtani. And he's under tons of team control. And he's only 23 or 24 years old. That is someone that the White Sox should be building around because it's not too often you get a player of the skill set like Luis Robert. But Lance Lynn, Tim Anderson, Eloy Jimenez, Lucas Giolito, Grandal, Clevin, those guys, I expect majority of them to be moved. And Giolito, been rumored to the Dodgers and a bunch of other teams. They have so much pitching. And I think Lance Lynn, in my opinion, is one of those guys that if I'm opposing GM, I'm trying to get. Now, I know he hasn't had a great season in 2023. He's been very disappointing. But a veteran arm who's had great years in the past, you put him in a new situation. If you put him on a winning team like Baltimore, like Minnesota, like Houston, like Texas, maybe even Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Cincinnati, the Dodgers, any of those teams, I feel like he could elevate himself, go back to years past Lance Lynn, and really help push that team to a deep postseason run. And Tim Anderson, free agent after the season, we'll see if Chicago moves him. Look, his value is the lowest it will ever be in his entire career because he's playing absolutely horrible on the offensive end. But would you rather get whatever you get in return for him? Who knows what that will be based off of his performance? Or do you just potentially extend him the qualifying offer and get a comp pick for next year's draft? But then again, if you offer him qualifying offer, that's like $20 million for Tim Anderson. For 1 year, he's not getting that annually. He might end up accepting that. So I think, look, Tim Anderson's going to be a guy, if there's a team out there that wants to play him at second or short and could think they could tap into his old offensive potential, he's going to be a very attractive player. And the White Sox are the biggest players in terms of sellers at this deadline. I also think Detroit, now they're not too far back in the division. They've been playing some solid baseball, but they're not really going anywhere. And I don't think push for the division title this season. Excuse me. They're 6 games back of the division right now. They're 6-4 in their last 10 games. I think you could see them move off of definitely a Michael Lorenzen, all-star this season, free agent after the year, and then maybe even Eduardo Rodriguez, who they signed last year to a big-time deal, is having a good season, and you could definitely get some nice pieces back for him and build for the future. The Mets, talk about one of the most disappointing teams in professional sports history, the most expensive team in Major League Baseball history, and it's not even close in terms of how much money they're spending on their team this season. And are most disappointing teams in baseball, 45-50, 16 and a half games back of the division. Look, they've won 3 straight as of this recording, but they're 7 games back in the wild card. They're just not. They're a postseason run. They're not going to make the postseason in 2023. So what guys could they move? Starling Marte, Mark Canha, Tommy Pham, potentially already on the move. Eduardo Escobar for some two pitching prospects from the Angels. Um, and maybe they move off of Max Scherzer. Now, the thing with Max Scherzer, he has a for next season $43 million. You're going to have to convince a team to either take on that salary, the potential salary that Max Scherzer's owed next year, or you're going to have to eat some of that up if you're the Mets. And it's not out of the question that they do eat up that salary with Steve Cohen as the owner. And look, if they trade, let's say they trade Max Scherzer, we'll just say, for example, to a team like the Cincinnati Reds, right? Are $43 million for a 40-year-old Max Scherzer next season and the remaining contract that he has this season. But if the Mets agree to eat a good majority of that, they're going to be able to get some better prospects, some better players back in return from a team if they do eat up that money. But look, Max Scherzer hasn't had a great season to begin with this year. But if you're trading for him, you're expecting to get Max Scherzer of old, and it's definitely not out of the question. Look, if a team trades for him, he's definitely capable of in a postseason series down the stretch when these games get a lot more important, that he's able to turn into vintage Max Scherzer that we saw his career. Verlander, I don't think he gets moved, but look, the Mets are going to sell some pieces. They need to get younger. They're old. They're expensive, and it just has not worked this season in 2023. The Cubs, are they going to buy or are they going to sell? It's interesting. I think they need to sell. They're 7.5 games back of the division, 5 games under 500 right now, and they have pieces that they're going to get a lot back for. Cody Bellinger is on a 1-year deal. He's playing amazing. He's playing like 2019 Cody Bellinger. I mean, he's not hitting as many home runs, right? His numbers aren't that insane, but he's having a insanely productive offensive season for the Chicago Cubs, and moving him is going to get a good time, a very nice return. Now, he is a rental free agent, but he's going to get a pretty decent in return because a lot of teams are going to want a very nice power left-handed bat that's hitting for average, putting the ball in play. Cody Bellinger is having an amazing offensive season. He also has some of the best outfield defense in baseball. And then also Marcus Stroman. He has the potential to be the best pitcher, starting pitcher available on this trade market. The season he's having, he's in the Cy Young contention. Right? I believe he has a player option or a team option or a mutual option after the season. Otherwise, he's going to be a free agent. Look, a team's going to look at that, where they are right now in terms of where these teams are right now in terms of trying to make a postseason push, a lack of starting pitching available. Marcus Stroman is going to get a huge return in this year's MLB trade deadline if the Cubs decide to sell, which they definitely should. They're not a team looking to compete right now in a weak division, but 5 games under 500. I think they're 7 games back of the division right now. They're not competing this year. They need to trade these two guys. And then finally is the Padres. I think they're going to sell. Now, this is easily the second most disappointing team in terms of having a super high payroll in playing sub 500 baseball. This game 500. They're 9.5 games back of the division. They're not going to make the postseason this year. And they have a very nice group of guys that they could trade. Blake Snell should have been an all-star pitcher. He's going to arguably be the best pitcher and easily the best left-handed starter available at this trade deadline. He's a free agent after the season. Josh Hader, best reliever available, potentially. He's a free agent after the season. Seth Lugo, he's very flexible. You can play him as a starter, as a reliever. He's going to eat you some nice innings. And then the big one, the big potential one is Juan Soto. Soto with a year of control after this season. He's a 2024 free agent. Look, the Padres, he's not going to sign an extension. He's with Scott Boras, the net agency. They never sign extensions. He's going to hit free agency in the 2024 offseason. And it's not guaranteed that they bring him back. With the way that they've been performing since Soto's got there, I know they made the NLCS last season, but with this season's performance of most likely missing out on the playoffs, who knows what year? How does this team improve in the offseason if they move on from Snell and Hader? How are they going to get better? What pitchers are they going to bring in? How are they going to improve offensively when they've had a horrible season play? It's not a guarantee that Soto re-signs with the team in free agency. And with the prospect haul that you gave to the Washington Nationals to get Juan Soto, I'm talking James Wood, who's a top 10 prospect in the game, Robert Hassel, CJ Abrams, and then some other prospects in there as well. Trading Soto at this year's deadline, this deal, you're basically getting a year and a half of Soto if you acquire him. The Padres are going to get some very nice value back. And they're still going to be a competitive team if they trade Soto. You have Machado, you have Fernando Tatis Jr. Like, you have the foundation and the players to be a very competitive team going forward, even with trading a guy like Juan Soto. So it's not out of the question that he gets moved. I don't think it's super likely. I mean, you're basically telling your fans in San Diego, season, next season, when you could just fight it through. Trade Snell, trade Hader, keep Juan Soto, and see what happens with him going forward. In terms of teams that are going to buy, Baltimore, they already bought. They traded for Shintaro Fujinami from the A's. Tampa Bay, Toronto, I could see Boston buying. The Yankees are interesting. They're last place. They just got swept and 3 games over 500 right now. I think they're more likely to sell some of these pieces. You could see them moving a Domingo Germán. It's interesting. They just don't have a lot of pieces I necessarily see them moving or selling. They definitely need to bring in some productive offensive pieces, like a Cody Bellinger would be a great fit with the Yankees. I think the Twins are going to buy. They need to add some more pieces to be a competitive team when it comes to the postseason. Texas, Houston, I think the Angels are going to buy, which will bleed into the Shohei Ohtani conversation in a second. Atlanta, Philly, Milwaukee, Cincinnati, the Dodgers, Diamondbacks, and Giants, I think, are all going to be teams they're going to be buying. And I just went through some of the teams selling, very limited market. Obviously, there's still a bunch of teams I didn't mention that could be selling. Oakland, Washington, Kansas City. Those will most likely sell, but they don't have a lot of talent. That's why they're among some of the worst teams in the league. All right, let's go to Shohei here. The Bulls, 49-48, game over 500. They just swept the Yankees. They're 9 games back of the American League West and 4.5 games back of a wild card spot. They will not trade Shohei. Now, sweeping the Yankees definitely helps them in terms of making a postseason push. And you look at the opponents they play. They play the Pirates this weekend, the Tigers next week, and then they play the Blue Jays up until the 30th, and then they play the Braves right around the trade deadline. They're not going to trade him. I mean, unless they lose every single series from now until the trade deadline, I don't see him getting moved. The way they've been playing, sweeping the Yankees, the pitching has been a lot better in this recent series. Up with guys like Moniak, Trout still seem to return. Brandon Drury, Zach Neto has been amazing. And then obviously Shohei is leading the way and carrying the charge for the Angels. They should buy. They definitely need to buy. They need to add starting pitching. They need to add potentially another big-time bat, whether it's an outfielder or an infielder. But they need to add starting pitching to this team. Now, look, in terms of Shohei, I think the only way that he considers returning to this Angels team in free agency in the offseason is if they do one of two things: make the World Series or win the World Series, maybe even the ALCS. But making the postseason, lose a card, or losing in the divisional series, I don't think is enough for Shohei to warrant coming back to this team, based off of past performance. Now, I think they have to win the World Series. I think they have to make the World Series or even make CS for him to consider returning to the team. Obviously, I think if If the Angels win the World Series, if they were to win the championship, I mean, where else is he going to go? He just won a title with his team. Like, what other team is going to give him the best opportunity to win? That would at least be the logic I think he should have in that conversation. So yeah, I don't think Shohei will return because the Angels, I don't think they're winning the World Series. I think it's not out of the question that they make the postseason, that we make the playoffs. But winning the World Series, winning a championship, making it to the American League Championship Series, I don't think is a likely possibility. Which means he will leave and we'll get a compensatory draft pick, which is not great. I'd rather trade him and get a very nice haul from the Dodgers, from the Orioles, from the Rays, from any of these teams. They're going to be interested in acquiring Shohei, even if it's for the next 2.5 months of the season. But at the end of the day, the Angels are too good to just blow up this season with a bunch of guys returning from injury and the potential to add some big-time players at this trade deadline. So Shohei's not getting traded. That's not a surprise. I think we all know that. Although as an Angels fan, knowing that we not make the postseason, we should trade him. But if we do make the playoffs, I mean, with Trout and Ohtani, anything realistically is possible in the MLB playoffs. DeAndre Hopkins signing with the Tennessee Titans. When he got cut from the Cardinals a few months ago, earlier in the offseason, NFL offseason, he listed quarterbacks, he listed teams, he listed what exactly he's looking for in his next team. I think it was a great quarterback, a high-level quarterback, a high-level defense, a team that's looking to compete for a championship, I believe. And then he goes to the Tennessee Titans, a team that finished, 8-9 last season, missed the playoffs, revamped their entire offensive line, got rid of everybody on the O-line, and Davis at quarterback in the second round. So let's take a look at this team. Quarterback situation, Ryan Tannehill most likely will be the starter for the first majority of the season. Who knows? He might start the whole season. And Will Levis is sitting there right behind him, waiting his turn to take over the starting quarterback job. Derrick Henry, obviously, sitting there at running back in the backfield. DeAndre Hopkins, Treylon Burks in the wide receiver room. Okonkwo, I always don't know how to say his name, sitting at tight end. They drafted Peter Skoronski at the offensive tackle position. And their defense, according to Pro Football, for defense in the NFL last season, they allowed 21 points per game. Look, DHop improves this receiver room drastically. They were 29th in receiving yards per game last season at 189.8 receiving yards per game. Look, DHop is going to improve this team. He's a legitimate number one wide receiver. I think he's still a top 15, maybe even a top 10 receiver in the game. I mean, over the last few seasons, he hasn't even played like a full year. Last year, missed some time getting suspended, but he still put up productive numbers under some very lackluster quarterback play. Look, he's going to Ryan Tannehill. That's not the greatest quarterback in the game. But looking at this Titans team, looking at the offensive weapons they have, they will be a better football team. They're going to be a better passing team. They're going to be a better running team adding DHop. Because now you can't just prepare as a defense to stop Derrick Henry. Because that's basically what every opposing defense was. Their game plan was against Tennessee last season. Look, we have to stop Derrick Henry, and then that's pretty much it. Who are you going to stop in the receiving room? Treylon Burks, he had a horrible, very disappointing season as a first-round rookie wide receiver last season. Who exactly are you game planning for in the receiver room? No one. You're game planning to stop Derrick Henry. And now adding DeAndre Hopkins to be the number one wide receiver, you got to stop D-Hop. You got to stop Derrick Henry. You got to pick and choose who you're trying to stop on any given drive. He's going to improve this team. And in a division, the AFC South, that, yeah, the Jacksonville Jaguars are there. They're the favorite to win the division. But how certain are we that the Jaguars are ready to take the leap as the number one team in that division? I know they won it last season, 9-8 record. Trevor Lawrence should take another huge step. He was great in the postseason. A great season last year for him. I know they're getting They have Christian Kirk, Zay Jones. They're bringing in um, Calvin Ridley. Evan Ingram signed an extension. They have a nice offensive line. They have some good pieces on the defensive side of the football. But how certain are we that they're going to be the premier team in this division? How certain are we? I do think it's likely. I think they're the favorites, but you can never rule out a team like the Titans, who finished 7-10 last season, they had to play a week. These two teams played a week 18 game to decide who got in the playoffs and who missed out. The Titans were one win away from making the postseason. The Jaguars were a loss away. Indianapolis, I don't think they'll be as good. I mean, they won 4 games last season. I think 4, 5, maybe even 6 wins is realistic for them next season. Houston shouldn't be any good. But look, those two teams have very young first-round quarterbacks that are going to have a lot of upside going forward. But Tennessee this season, it's Tennessee or the Jacksonville Jaguars, in my opinion, winning this division. I think the Jaguars are the likely favorite, but adding DHop, adding some a very nice premier weapon on the outside to go along with Derrick Henry in the backfield, Tannehill, Levis, who gets the starting job, who's going to be the quarterback when it comes, to the second half of the season. I guess we'll see. How does the defense improve? Look, they're coached by Mike Vrabel, who's one of the best coaches in the NFL. This Titans team, they won 7 games last season. They could have made the postseason. I think this Titans team could potentially win the division. I don't think it's likely. I'm not saying they're the favorites, but adding DHop to this team with the culture, with the coaching staff, with Derrick Henry, I do think they have the potential, if everything goes right, to win the division. I don't think it's likely. Like I said, I think the Jaguars, it's their division to lose. But I wouldn't be completely surprised if the Tennessee Titans found a way to win the division next season. All right, finally, NFL running backs. Oh my gosh. I need to blow my nose. NFL running backs. Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs. Both those guys were unable to reach long-term deals, contract extensions, and neither of them have signed the franchise tag yet. Look, the running back market, quite honestly, no player is going to get big-time deals going forward. There's just no point. And look, Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs are 2 of the best running backs in the NFL. Saquon, through his first 5 years of his career, has had 3 1,000-yard seasons. Obviously, he missed a year with an torn ACL, and then half of a season recovering from that ACL. Last season, had 10 thirds. Saquon Barkley is arguably the most important player to the New York Giants' success, and he's a very important player. He's a very big piece to that offense, and he's a very, very good player. He's a top 10, top 5 running back in the NFL. And Josh Jacobs has been one of the most consistent running backs in the NFL over his 4-year career. 3 seasons of 1,000 yards. He led the NFL in rushing last season, 1,600 yards, 12 touchdowns for him. He's a huge piece. He's an amazing player. But there's no point in paying a guy like this, either of these guys. How they are, how valuable they can be, what they bring to an offense, to an opposing defense, how you have to game plan for those guys. I mean, look at the Raiders situation. How are you going to game plan for Josh Jacobs, Devontae Adams? They brought in Jacoby Myers from the Raiders, or from the Patriots, Hunter Renfrow. How are you going to game plan for all of those weapons? And then even the Giants. I mean, you have Daniel Jones, who was a very nice dual threat quarterback last season. Saquon Barkley, they added Darren Waller. They have some nice pieces in that receiver room. But quite frankly, are not as big of game changers as they appear to be. I mean, you look at the previous Super Bowl winners since 2009, and their leading rusher in that season. In 2021, the Rams won the Super Bowl. Sony Michel was the leading rusher of that team. He had 845 rushing yards. The year before that, Ronald Jones Jr., 978 rushing yards. In 2019, the Chiefs was Damian Williams. The Patriots, Sony Michel, LeGarrette Blount with the Eagles and the Patriots. C.J. Anderson, LeGarrette Blount again, Percy Harvin, Ray Rice, Ahmad Bradshaw, James Starks, Pierre Thomas. Going back to 2009, those were the leading rushers of every Super Bowl winning team. How many of those guys are top 10 running backs during the year that they played? Right? LeGarrette Blount has never been a top 10 running back in the NFL. Sony Michel, Leonard Fournette, Cam Akers, Ronald Jones, none of those guys have ever been top 10 running backs at any point in their career, yet alone the season that they won the Super Bowl with their team. So paying a running back like a Saquon Barkley, like a Josh Jacobs, with how good they are, does not impact winning a Super Bowl. Look, the Kansas City Chiefs have had Kareem Hunt on their roster. Obviously, let go of him for some off-the-field issues. But the running back, they had Isaiah Pacheco. They had McKinnon. They've had a plethora of guys in the backfield to help them win a Super Bowl in 2019 and this most recent year in 2023. You look at teams in the NFL, none of them that are competing for a Super Bowl have top 10 running backs. The Eagles last season had 3 running backs. Miles Sanders, Jalen Hurts was one of their leading rushers. None of those teams have a Dalvin Cook, have Ezekiel Elliott, have Kareem Hunt, have Saquon, have Josh Jacobs, have Derrick Henry, have Nick Chubb. It is going to be a repeating cycle with these running backs because there is no point in paying a guy $52 million a year, $50 million a year to not impact winning, to be unproductive player. Le'Veon Bell, when he signed with the Jets, he got 4 years, $52 million, $27 million guaranteed. He was with the Jets. Ezekiel Elliott signed 6 years, $90 million with the Cowboys, $50 million guaranteed over 3 years. They cut him, and he was horrible for those 3 years of his deal. Right there behind him, who is now taking over the reins of starting running back for the Cowboys. So as good as these players are, Saquon Barkley is an amazing running back. Josh Jacobs is an amazing player. And we'll get that with Nick Chubb when it's time for him to get a deal. And all of these running backs, these top premier backs, as good as they are, and as long as of career those guys have had, they quite frankly do not impact winning a Super Bowl as running backs once did. And look, people will say the running back market, they're also not getting paid because they have the lowest average career length of around 2.5 years. But those are for the bottom end guys. Those are for guys that are late round draft picks or guys that are second, third string running backs. But these premier top 10 running backs that consistently have 10, 15-year NFL careers, they are getting paid. But they do not, and teams value winning over a guy like Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs, who are going to produce nice stats, produce nice numbers, and help their team on the offensive end. But are they realistically going to improve and help them win a Super Bowl? Is Saquon Barkley signing a deal this offseason, let's say he gets $50 million, is he going to elevate them to win a Super Bowl with the Giants in the next 5 years? I don't think so. Look, the NFL is a passing game. Obviously, you still want to have a good running game, but it's all about the pass. It's about getting the ball downfield, getting the ball to your receivers' hands. And quite frankly, these running backs do not impact winning a Super Bowl. So as good as these guys are, they are just not worth paying $50 million, $30 million guaranteed over the next 3 to 5 seasons for the production you can get out of a guy like a Sony Michel or a 3rd round or 4th round or 5th round running back from the NFL draft. That's going to do it, though, for this episode of the franchise. We'll be back very soon. Another episode, more MLB trade deadline, NFL, college football, and NBA. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Threads in the description. See you guys later.